On this episode of AVWeek, AVIXA releases their latest IOTA report. We lose $20 billion in the AV industry in 2020. When will we get it back? Taking a look at video conferencing fatigue and how to fix it. And Zoom releases hardware as a service. All that and more. Next on AVWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AVWeek, episode 465, recorded Friday, July 17th, 2020. Interactive VC.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box, and by
Vadio, makers of the new NDI professional broadcast camera, the RoboShot 30E NDI.
And by Draper.
This is AVWeek, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I'm your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have got for this week. Two newbies, at least, to the AVWeek universe, and I'll explain that in a second. But first and foremost, you know her and love her. Her name is Corey Shaver from QSC. Welcome, ma'am.
Hey, good to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. So a young man who I met through SCN's The Nine, his name is Joe Dunbar, and he works for Diversified. Welcome, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. And a young man I met last month while we did some webinars for Wolf Vision, Akintayo Adewale from Barracks. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. So our first story comes to us from our own website, AVNation.tv. Zoom has launched hardware as a service. The HAAS model, or HAAS model, I guess, aims to make buying the technology, budgeting, and scaling even easier. Zoom is partnering with D10, Neat, Poly, and Yealink for the hardware parts of this solution. Joe, we'll start with you on this. How does this compare to other as-a-service models that we've seen in the AV space?
I mean, I wish I had something more exciting to say about it, but it's pretty on par for what we expected. I think Zoom, you know, and all the UC providers in the space have a pretty unique position in the sense that they're relatively direct to the customer, and we get looped in a variety of ways. But with that kind of reach to the customer, you know, it's kind of just a matter of time on this. And I want to, at some point, we're going to have to talk about it. It doesn't have to be in this moment, but I want to. Who's using a Zoom phone? Has anybody used a Zoom phone yet? No? Okay.
No.
I've seen some. I haven't actually used one, but like I use the soft phone. I'm trying to figure out the situation in which you would have a hard phone over, like, I don't know why you would.
Joe, I would ask, like, who's using a phone these days, right?
That's just it. I mean, the Zoom phone, at my last role, I had a Zoom soft phone. It was fantastic because everything was built into one app. And, you know, the hardware as a service model makes sense, of course. As a whole, not specific to Zoom, I think there's a lot of people that will take issue with the as a service model. And I think really the one way to break that down right away is by I don't know, maybe if we change the term, that would be enough. I mean, that's what I haven't got yet, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that one, but ultimately, I mean, it's not a surprise. This is pretty much the direction we've seen it, you know, going, and it's going to continue to kind of happen this way. I think integrators still have a place and a role in this, you know, ecosystem. I don't think we're going to disappear or go away because people have access to, you know, hard phones or something like that, or even Zoom rooms for that matter. I mean, a lot of corporate spaces are made up of a lot more than just those components. So,
I mean, I would say, Joe, that certainly that's the case today. But I think a lot of people are starting to look at the fact that they just don't need as much as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge concern of mine. Is like, you know, we've been putting in these, you know, these A+ systems for years for our clients, and now they're all kind of like understanding that, hey, all we really need is our laptop and, you know, some good peripherals in order to have a, you know, good functional call. So it concerns me a little bit, you know, but when I think of Zoom, they've got software as a service now, they've got platform as a service now, they've got infrastructure as a service now, and now they're starting to encroach on the one area that we as integrators, you know, kind of pride, which is we're the ones who design the systems, put the hardware in, you know, commission the systems, and then we have a you know, complete relationship from a service standpoint for maintaining those systems. So like, that's like that last 25% now that we are starting to see some of these other up and coming giants starting to encroach on a little bit. So I think I agree with you in the sense that it doesn't mean that we're out of the game, but it's a signal to me that we have to start playing the game a little bit differently. We have to start thinking about it a little bit differently in terms of how we approach design, because I think people are okay with the basics. A friend of mine, I was talking to them earlier about his wife who runs a major record label, and they use Google Chat. I mean, this major label, worldwide company, and all they use is Google Chat, and they're okay with the inconsistencies, or okay with the gaps or the lacks of bells and whistles. They've just made it work because it's for free, So, I think I agree with you that we have a place. I just think we have to re-engineer maybe that place that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I'd love to. Oh, sorry, Corey, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, because you're both integrators, how do you see this because we're talking about these smaller rooms today, but don't you think as this model gets launched, number one, other platforms like potentially Google, again, like you're mentioning, and probably Microsoft, et cetera, they're going to likely follow this trend. And then what happens to these spaces where AV integrators are pulled in, like the all hands space, these specialty spaces? Do you think your clients will ask for those to be hardware as a service?
Yeah, so definitely that aspect, those will for sure, which is great. And that's kind of why I don't mind this. They're helping push the overall agenda forward. It's way easier for everybody to, learn about the as a service model through Zoom. And then when I talk about it, we're already familiar with it. Now, Akina, you had mentioned a point about how, they're kind of encroaching on this. And now I think it's just about bringing value in a different place, right? So I agree that there are a lot of folks that say, all right, I've got, a little Bluetooth speaker, something like that, and I've got my laptop, and this is kind of good enough. There are still a lot of people who say, I was on some site visits this week, and there's folks who are saying, I'm using my laptop and this isn't enough for me. Like, I need something that's more quality. And also I'm seeing a lot of requests for these spaces to be more flexible and to do additional things outside of conference calls. Certainly one thing we're seeing is video engagement going up, and companies are looking at capturing more of an audience that way. So, we need a conference room that can double as a YouTube studio and be mobile and go out to our machine floor. Like, how can we tack on to this? And I'm not saying Zoom doesn't have the talent to put that all together. I'm saying, are they trying to get involved in that kind of level up sort of thing? Maybe later.
I definitely think that there is a reliance upon us as integrators. It'll still be a matter of us going in to actually install all this hardware. What I think it's just going to be a different sort of communication. So if Zoom is providing the solution, now the client's speaking to Zoom, and now Zoom is calling us when there's an issue from a service standpoint. That was one of the things that I had read in that article. It looks like they're going all the way down to the service level, so that if you have an issue with your space, they'll act as that intermediary now, if I'm not mistaken. And now they're calling the integrator or that subcontractor to come in and fix the issues. So we lose a little bit of touch with the client directly in that regard, because instead of us getting that direct service contract with regards to their Zoom room, and getting that direct call, so that that account executive or that design engineer can have that conversation with that client on the other end. Like, hey, how's the kids doing? Hey, oh yeah, by the way, I'm having an issue with this, with a particular room. Oh yeah, no problem. We'll come in and take care of it. There's that, you lose that sort of interpersonal piece of it, with this specific sort of model. If Zoom does start kind of taking over a large portion of that, then we lose a little bit of touch there. So I just want to try to figure out ways that we can kind of maintain that, and that may be with other, systems that are just like you're saying, systems that are much more involved. They're not necessarily Zoom based, or Zoom's at the center of it. There's just a lot more functionality that's happening with the room beyond what a Zoom or a Teams or whatever can actually provide. So yeah, just making sure that we're maintaining that channel. I think it's important.
One of the things I thought of when I read it was, most companies that I deal with have a primary platform and then also a secondary. So how does this play in that, right? So if Zoom is their secondary, do they still get that service, or does it have to be, just curious how they'll manage that, because most companies have a couple of platforms that they use.
Yeah, you mentioned something too earlier on, there's that. Not only do they have several that they'll use, right? Like we standardize on this platform, Zoom, Teams, whatever. But and you may not even internally say we also use this or that or the other thing. It's like my customers use this, that, or the other thing. So like now we have to be able to kind of play inside of that. And so when we work with them, we'll use whatever platform they're on. But when these people work with their customers, whose platform are they using, right? I mean, that's a great point too. That flexibility has to exist, that kind of agnostic, you know, and I think eventually all these companies are really working towards that. Let's interoperability.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like there's a couple of different like platforms, you know, that I've been looking at that kind of help to solve that problem. Like T1B and Bluescape are two ones that I kind of think about that, you know, they kind of bring everybody together. I don't know what they're using, if it's PEXIP or something in the background that they're using. They bring all these different platforms together. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the way that you kind of bridge the gap between having your primary and secondary or these just disparate, you know, conferencing systems, whether they're hard or soft. I think it's those sort of unifying platforms that can kind of help, you know, make things seem a bit more seamless. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do have a confession, Joe. I still use a hard phone because I'm old and I like it. I just want to say.
At my last job, Tim, at my last job, they sent me a hard phone, and I was like, "What is this for?"
I'm with you.
I asked both of we have two remote workers currently. One lives in Tulsa, one lives in Texas. I asked both of them if they wanted hard phones, and one who was slightly younger than the other one said no, and the one who happened to be, you know, more closer to my age actually said yes. So it was very, very much a generational thing, I think. So.
You know what I'm using my hard phone for right now? It's a coupling because my cable from the router was too short into my office, and that's all it's being used for now. I won't mention the manufacturer's name, but
no, yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for watching this first segment of AV Week. To check out the rest of the episode for free, click on the link below. Go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.